all together.
Hello, and welcome to Covert Castaway. I'm Holly.
Je suis Stéphane.
Join us as we share what we learn and how we're making the transition to liveaboard cruising. Hey, this is Holly real quick, and I just wanted to give you a heads up that today's podcast was recorded over Zoom, and the connection on my side wasn't great. So when I did the edit, I tried to cut all the crap out. Hopefully you'll enjoy it, though. There's a lot of medical planning, preparation, and insurance information included in here, and I hope you find it useful. So today we get to talk about medical preparation, and there's a lot to discuss. But first, we're going to cover what we've been doing the last couple of weeks. We're recording this podcast over Zoom, actually, because Stefan is in France and I'm in the US. What are you up to, buddy?
I'm adjusting to my new lifestyle.
As a single, living at large as a single man in France.
Yeah, in a touristic town, partying at night, drinking coffee, smoking cigarettes, and eating pastries.
Right. I do believe the last one is probably true. So let's just kind of cover where we left off. So we were headed to France together, and we were able to take our bags that were stored at your parents' friend's house down to the south of France, where Outremer is, to make sure we had all of our stuff. We checked into an Airbnb with all of our bags, and which was quite a bit of hauling bags up and down. And then we attended Outremer Week, and we were able to do some courses, which we'll talk about. And then I headed back to the US and then had a business trip and came back to the US, and I'm here now. And you get to hang out there and finish all of the boat commissioning and boat work going on there. What's the status of the boat?
Yeah, just before we dive into that, who thought that was a good idea that we will spend like 2 months apart?
Yeah. I think this will be the longest we've been apart, actually.
For sure.
Just
yeah.
Kind of sad.
And especially after since we started cruising, I guess we've been together nonstop between COVID and being on the boat.
Yeah.
And traveling. So it's an adjustment.
Yeah. We'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
Anyway, I'm here with my daughter, so I'm staying busy, and we're doing stuff here, so that's pretty cool. Yeah. So what's going on with the boat?
And so the boat is during the Outremer Week, we found out the boat was delayed by a week. So now the delivery date is August 7th. It will get into the water on July 3rd. And so once it gets into the water, the focus will be on, there will be some test sail. What do you call this? A test for the sails, which found out have been fabricated. Some have been delivered to Brittany, France. Yeah. So at some point, our sails will come into La Grande Motte and then try all these sails. And so that will have to happen once the boat is in the water. The other thing that will happen is they'll be doing some testing on the engine, because we'll be the first 52 with the 90 engines. So that's going to have to happen. And I'm sure like Outremer has a long list of stuff that they go through as part of their quality control. So, most of the work will have to be done. And then putting the mast up and all the rigging. But that will be done probably on the same day or as the boat is being put in the water. So it'll be a busy month, the last month.
So last time we were together, we were doing Outremer Week. So just a quick recap of what we covered. We did sailing and boat handling on the 52, hull number 1, which was super cool because we got to sail basically on what will be our boat. And actually it was really cool because, you know, I stepped on the boat and I was like, oh, okay, this is totally manageable. You know, I felt like it felt familiar. You know what I mean? It didn't feel overly big. And even doing the docking, the boat was really responsive. So that was really cool.
It's still pretty big. I think it's like when you look at it from the dock, and
it looks big from the dock for sure.
It's definitely, the freeboard is very high. It's a big boat, but I think it's like human size manageable, if that makes any sense. And then with all the controls that you can bring back to the cockpit, everything, like it's a nice open cockpit salon area. And so there's definitely lots of space and with all the windows and the visibility. So it's very open. But at the same time, everything is kind of, human size, I guess.
Manageable. Definitely manageable by 2 people. And I thought that was really awesome. And there were some tips that we learned from the instructor about how to do things single-handed. He was really big into making sure you could do some things like reefing with one person, which is really interesting. So I'm excited to get on the boat and kind of try those things on our own boat.
So then I can sleep.
I can reef all the time if I want. It's awesome.
Yeah. Well, no, maybe I'll wake up and I'll be like, what's up with the speed?
Yeah. The other course we took was offshore maintenance, which we're going to definitely do a future episode about, because there's a lot of, maintenance parts and spares, a lot of interesting things we're learning there. So we'll save the recap on that for actual episode. You got to take a drone class, flying the drone class. Have you been able to do the drone at all while you've been there?
No, because I've been busy doing other things.
Okay. And then we took an offshore medical course, which is the main topic of this podcast. So not to go off on tangents, but the other thing I want to just quickly cover is the sailing days and the Outremer Cup. So I missed that part of it, but it sounds like you had a couple really cool days of quote unquote racing. How was that?
Oh, no, that was no quote unquote racing. That was racing.
Amateur Outremer racing. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, no, we got very lucky with the weather. Overall it was pretty lighter. But the great thing is those Outremer can quite move in even lighter, probably like 20 boats or something, I'm guessing. And no, there was definitely lots of races each day. And the starts are interesting because there's definitely some close contact.
Those boats get so close together. I remember from last year, it was so scary. They're just so close.
And that was quite awesome. And the first day I kind of focused on taking some videos and pictures. And then the other 2 days I was kind of more involved in maneuvers and stuff. So no, that was definitely great. I mean, you discovered this last year. Yeah, you had never raced before, and you can share, but I think you realize that you do a lot more of the maneuvers and you have to move faster, and so that kind of pushes you out of your kind of class mode. And then you learn quite a bit. Yeah.
And
so
it's definitely cool. So I'm bummed that I missed it. But the class we got to take together was the offshore medical course. And that was super awesome. And we want to talk about the medical in a lot of detail in today's podcast. So what was interesting before we kind of go into what we learned is just some basic statistics on some of the problems. So what we were reading about is there was a study done recently. They studied like 412 boats or something, and they were sailing off different parts of the world for a 4-year period, various degrees or lengths of sailing from 6 months to a few years. And what they learned is the medical situations were like 56% illnesses and 44% injuries. And basically half of the boats declared at least one incident, with the average of 2.5 incidents per boat. So that's just some interesting statistics we learned. We also learned that where they occurred, the incidents occurred were 51% at sea, 24% onshore, and 25% is described as like either at anchor or close to land, or, I imagine that includes things at marinas or docks as well. In terms of the injuries, which was the 44% of the incidents that were encountered, 42% were wounds, 1/5 of those linked to fishing. So we're not going to be fishing on the boat. So
good.
That should cut down
reducing our risk.
Reducing our risk. Sprains and fractures through falls or contact with structures is 23%. So no running on the boat, no jumping or running on the dock or from the boat to the dock would be a good idea. 25% were burns related
15,
to either
15%.
Sorry, what I say?
25.
Sorry, 15% were burned from either the galley or working with ropes. It's good. I always wear my gloves. 12% were looks like stings from marine wildlife, so jellyfish, scorpionfish, etc. 1% is head injuries, head trauma with evacuation. Yeah, so don't get hit in the head. And others were 6%. 6% tendonitis or dental. So that's the injury component. And then illnesses, 56% of the problems encountered were with illnesses, as I mentioned before. 30% of those had to do with digestive or like stomach issues, UTI or kidney stones, urinary tract infections were 16%. Ear, nose, and throat, like ear infections or sore throat, was 15%. Skin infections were 12%. Dental illnesses, infections, or breakages were 8%. And looks like back issues or osteo issues were 6%. And cardiac and respiratory, pulmonary or asthma was 3%, and other things like dengue fever, seasickness with dehydration, eye problems, and allergies were about 10%. So, the worst things that you think about happening, obviously, are the head traumas and cardiac arrest, which relatively were a very low percentage. So, that kind of puts things in perspective, right? The likelihood of those things happening is pretty low.
I think, it's kind of helpful because otherwise you're like, and somebody described it, and some people might have different philosophy, like, but you're basically buying a medical kit as kind of an insurance policy. You hope to never have to use it, but at least you need to be able to take care of like those basic things. wounds, basically watch where you step or how you walk and stuff like this, what you touch, and watch what you eat. Kind of like that addresses a lot of the those main problems.
I think basically living the daily boat life with basic safety first, always have one hand for the boat, no matter what, watch where you step, be careful.
Mm-hmm.
Just being careful, I think, and more thoughtful about things is probably eliminates a lot of risk.
And I guess what happens is if everything goes well on the boat, you're going to tend to move slow and do things properly. It's more, I think, once something happens on the boat, and typically that's going to be when, something breaks, or then the conditions, or like, sea state and wind. This is when you tend to go fast to try to solve the problem. And that's probably at those times, those things are going to happen. So I think it's to always remain kind of do things sequentially as much as possible, and try even in the moment of like, how can I say, of intense moment, to try to not go too fast, because then that's usually when you're going to kind of do something wrong. Easier said than done.
There's times of urgency, right? But I think that the key thing is, to remain calm, be deliberate, and if it's obviously if it's urgent, to act quickly, but to be methodical and deliberate, in your actions, deliberately figure out where you're going to step, deliberately walk quickly, like there's ways, I think, to think about it. That was a huge takeaway for me, is so much can be avoided,
And then even as bad the situation is, like, you could make the situation worse. So I think, so it's like, just to, to take the time to go through the whatever problem you're dealing with, and to remember there are both parts that can be replaced. And sure, it's not good if you have potentially something that's going to break and you want to try to resolve it, quickly, but that's easier and cheaper than when you're at sea and then you have like a broken arm or
someone
something,
getting hurt.
Yeah,
for sure. So that was a really big take. And I was reflecting on the medical book, and the trauma response books I've read, very much about if something happens, the first thing you have to do is, completely scan the environment. Like if you see someone fall over there or up on, or, far away from you, before you run to them, just take a moment to scan the environment and look for other risks, because, maybe a line is flapping around or something that could actually also injure you as you're running to their rescue. So being just more thoughtful and to take a moment and make sure that, again, you're just being deliberate and even addressing the emergency. I think that was reiterated in the class. So we're going to just kind of go through 4 sections. We're going to talk about preparing the crew, improving the medical skills on board, what we learned in the class, how to equip the boat. We'll talk about medical kits, and then we'll talk about telemedicine and insurance a little bit.
Basically, like as part of our health insurance, like we don't take at the moment dental insurance in the US, because we figured like when we travel after your experience you had in Turkey, and it's really good, it's cheap, and why not do things, the basic stuff here. And so it was very convenient because there was a dentist office downstairs in my building. So I just walked over there, and I thought, why not? And then basically they gave me an appointment, and then I said, call me anytime, because I live upstairs, and they ended up calling me 2 days later and say, hey, can you come on Saturday? And I'm like, sure, I'll be there. So I walked downstairs, and
awesome.
And so, it's very nice, and basically, you pay out of pocket, but it's very reasonable fees. So,
and we've been doing the big checkups. I went and got, my annual physical exam kind of done, and that was all fine. And then just making sure we're current on vaccines. I think we're still wondering if we should get rabies shot. I think that's the one that's a little bit for me outstanding on whether we should do or not. And then getting in shape. Yeah. So since we've been kind of traveling a lot, we did our thing in Bali, and we at least for me, I got a good kind of core base, I think, going when we were there. And so I've been focused on, I started back a Pilates class and, doing more kind of core strengthening. And then you got to join a gym. So you're doing that. How's that going?
Yeah,
Are you sore?
No, I think, well, it was helpful what we did in Bali, because we were doing basically like physical exercise between yoga, stretching, and so forth every day for 14 days. So that was very helpful. And so I think that was kind of an important reset. And now it's kind of, I need to continue the stretching, which I haven't done. But I thought I'll join the gym and then continue to kind of build a little bit of strength and in preparation, for being on the boat. And I think once we're on the boat, once you set up a routine, we were pretty good with our first boat to do some kind of yoga, basic strengthening.
I think yoga is really good. Yeah, for sure. Just to stretched and like have your core strength, because you're always jerking your body in weird angles with like a bag of groceries or something, or a bag of something, And so it's good.
I think, we realized this the first time we moved on the boat. Moving from sitting at computers all day to basically walking barefoot, standing on the boat. And then it took a little bit of time for bodies to adjust. So
like even the little muscles in your feet, you know what I mean? Like even just standing on flat surfaces.
And then a hard surface. So it's definitely helpful to try to work things out before you get on the boat. So that's preparing the crew, is like anything you can do 3 to 6 months before you're going to leave, that you can use that time. And so that kind of starts there.
It's just to help prevent injuries. And, I'm trying to lose a little bit of extra weight just because it puts extra pressure on my back and, my knees and everything.
And
it's not much, but even if you can lose a few pounds, it kind of helps, right?
And it makes, even without the injuries, it makes your experience better, because if you feel good, then you can be more active on the boat, and you're kind of, but once you have aches and pains, it definitely changes your approach for the day. So I think all this is important.
Yeah. So then we took the medical training, and that was awesome. I think you had taken medical, like a basic first aid before. I took first aid and CPR before too. And then I read a few books, and that was one class we definitely wanted to take together, because God forbid one of us takes it and the other one doesn't, and then the wrong person gets hurt. You know what I mean? So that was a really great class. That was 2 days. The instructor was absolutely epic. I thought he was so great. And his last name was Shackleton, which was even really funny. He was from the UK. He was super awesome. He's sort of like this extreme sport guy, like he does like ice climbing and all these like extreme sports. And I guess he's like one of, what do you say, 40 people in the UK
who are or something with some level of certification. Because it takes
it was some medical certification.
On major
on the expeditions.
I think what was good about it is, instead of like just looking at PowerPoint slide, it was very interactive, and it has a lot of knowledge to share, and we were asking a lot of questions, and he was able to somehow keep a structure in all these, and so that made this class.
It was awesome. The basic topics we covered, so we went back over the kind of basic first aid and CPR, and then he kind of went into triage situations. So we talked about choking, he talked about stopping the bleeding, in an instance where one severs, a major artery. We did lacerations and we practiced stitching. How did you like that, working on a pig's leg?
I was like, poor pig. And
Vegans,
but there was an
reminded me, like,
orange.
we see this all the time. We see this all the time in the butcher shop. Like when they handed us the pig's leg, I was like, oh, it's a pig's
Yeah.
leg, and then gross, and then it's like, oh, it's just like at the butcher shop.
Yeah, we also had an orange to practice, and no, I think that was good. So the other part of the course that was really good is very hands-on. Like for CPR, for the ABCs, and you have all the regular like bodies, and then for what was I think good about the stitching is once you see those medical tools on your table, there's a little bit of apprehension. You're like, holy shit, like if it's a screwdriver and stuff like this, you're like, okay, I've seen those, you have used those, but suddenly like
it's true.
This medical equipment, I've only seen it like on TV and stuff. And now it's in front of me and I'm like, oh man. So having used it takes away a little bit of that apprehension. Hopefully I don't have to, or we don't have to use those. But now it took a little bit of that mystery and realizing that, if you can be methodical, then, that's just going to.
And he had us practice like giving a shot with the needle, which was also good, like where to put it and stuff. And so that was good to practice, something you do every day either. And then we learned about burns and stings, how to properly use an EpiPen for anaphylaxis or asthma attacks. We talked about seizures and what to do if someone has a seizure, and then some basic things around staging a fracture. Yeah, but the practicality of it all, like approaching the problem practically speaking. He was very matter of fact. He wasn't like theoretical. Like he's like, look, you can try to do that, but just do this. In some of the conversations we were having, or when we talked about the should we have a AED on board, right? Like we had a conversation about, okay, if you're offshore, the AED probably won't help you because you're so far from shore. Even if you're able to revive someone, getting them follow-up help, is a long way away. But if you're at anchor or near shore, you definitely want the extra hour, to help someone as you're getting, so that I think put me over the edge on getting an AED on board as an example, just to be able to know that you can do everything within your control to help somebody.
I think
have any thoughts on that?
No, I mean, initially it's like, okay, it's unnecessary. It's an expensive item, but I was looking at refurbished and ones, and it's kind of like more affordable. Yeah, the gist of it is they say it's unnecessary for offshore, but the conclusion we came to was, you just want to know that you had the tools on board to do whatever you
everything.
could. So you're not thinking like, oh, I tried to save like $1,500
if I would have had this. Yeah, exactly.
And that extra hour.
And you only need it to work once, right?
Yeah, it's a little bit like any of those classes. You spend 2 days. And you're not going to be an expert on diesel engine. You're not going to be an expert on medical as being a medical doctor, and so it's kind of what you can absorb and prep you to kind of help you at least make some, preparing a medical kit and then kind of breaking down the high level things, so it's not like totally new to you when something happens. But the second one is also, there was a book that he showed us, and that looked like very, very well done. It's called the Skipper's Medical Emergency Handbook, First Aid at Sea. And it was very, very graphical, like flowcharts type things. And that's definitely looks like a great book to have. And whatever medical kit you buy, there's going to be some kind of a book like this. Can you hear the signals in the background?
I can hear the signals in the background.
That's pretty cool.
All right, so let's talk about medical kits, because that's the third topic here: how to equip the boat. So yeah, what have you learned about the different kits?
Yeah, so basically, if you need to get a medical kit that's going to be adapted to like how far you go offshore. Yeah, so here we're going to talk about more like ocean type medical kit, because you're like far away from any immediate assistance. So one thing that I found out, so I mean, basically they're all going to follow the basic standard, there is some guidelines, on that people have probably based on statistics, based on, there's no need to have everything in the pharmacy. And so more or less, I think from what I've seen, they're all going to contain about the same thing. It was interesting because there's this company in the UK, MSOS, that provides a medical kit in two very nice, like yellow hard shell, suitcases type thing. And one is like kind of ready to go into a life raft, like kind of a grab bag. And it's all organized in different subsections. And so they have found a company in France called Medidistance. They have everything in French. They have some obviously stuff translated as well in English. So when you combine, so those medical kits basically include medicine and includes medical tools. I don't know if tools is the right word, equipment. And in the medicine, you can customize. I guess it's not like off the shelf. If you are allergic to some antibiotics, and they'll put some. So there is some kind of a consultation that happens. So it's when you're ready to order a medical kit, just make sure you give a little bit of a time, probably like something maybe like 4 weeks or something between to get everything sorted out. But the price was quite different. The French company was about 1,300 euros. The UK company was twice as much, 2,600 euros. So that was kind of a little bit of a surprise. So we're probably, based on the feedback I got and the comparing those two, I think we're probably going to go with that French company, and I'll just double check that everything is in English. But I remember having a conversation with them about labels.
Would be something. Something happened to you, and I'm like, "Oh, go to the kit," and everything's in French. I'll be like, "What?"
Yeah,
it's not going to work out.
That would not be good for me. So I'll double check a couple of things like these, but otherwise it comes in soft shell, which I don't mind. I think on one way on boat, it's always easier, and it's also structured in different compartments, burns and this and that. So that's kind of was one big surprise on one way, but otherwise all these type of equipment is going to be pretty complete.
And it comes with all the medications and stuff, which I think when we did the last 2 seasons in the med, we sort of pieced together ourselves with our doctor. We had like, you take a certain antibiotic, I take a certain antibiotic because we're both allergic to different things. Some basic stuff like anti-nausea medication, some seasickness patches, that kind of stuff. But we didn't have, specific, like the burn kit and we had basic stuff, which I think is pretty easy to do with your own doctor if you're kind of in coastal waters. But I kind of feel like offshore, it's a whole different ballgame because you need to be able to ready for anything.
And the other thing is to get those medical kits. Typically, for the offshore, like the ocean ones, they will require that you have attended some kind of training like the one we've attended, because obviously there's some specialized, tools in medicine, and so they want you to have some basic knowledge on that. So that's something to keep in mind. And I was reading my notes that I got from the UK company. It said to supply the medicine, they will need the vessel registration and the captain's license. Mm-hmm. So that's I'm not sure. I'll have to check with the French company, because ideally you want that early, but they might require again like vessel registration information and stuff like this.
Yeah. So that's the medical kit. In terms of just quickly the medicines as well, and it sort of transitions to the next topic, is we're learning more about the telemedicine piece.
Before we go, and the other thing for people who already have a medical kit is to not forget, like anything on a boat, you need to do like regular maintenance on it. So that means some medicine expires, or maybe it's been used, certain things have been used in the past. So just like a life jacket or something, like maybe once a year, just go through your list and then upgrades things. So that's kind of a part of that category, I think, of how to equip your boat.
Okay, so what I was starting to talk about is if you need to use telemedicine or doctors, and let's kind of break them up into online doctors and then the telemedicine. And then we talked a little bit, if you're offshore and you need to contact telemedicine or get rescue, the rescue authorities. So for the online doctors, there's definitely there's different things you can use for online telemedicine, and people have gotten used to that with COVID. There's also these that are per region doctor, and we've heard about for the EU, where you can talk to a doctor online and get a prescription in minutes where you are locally. So that's good. So you don't need to necessarily, if you're you don't necessarily need to find a local doctor, although you could. In the US, specifically, if you're traveling around and you're in the US, you can actually sign up medical, which is across the US, which is you sign up for, it's like $200 a year kind of membership. And then it's between $175 and $250 a visit if you need to go into a clinic, and there's clinics everywhere. So it's actually kind of an interesting model. So you don't go to an ER, you go to one medical, and they can treat you. I don't think they're open 24/7, but for that can wait, like an earache or something sinus or something like that. So I think what's important is understanding like what is the backup option if you're in a different country and you're not sure about your own insurance and what it covers, or what the available kind of services are in the countries. So like One Medical, for instance, has the clinics, but part of the membership includes the teledoctor too. So those are some things to think about. But in terms of the kind of getting immediate help when you're on the boat, what we also learned is that some countries, we're not sure if we need to do more research, but we're not sure if it's all countries or just some countries. France, for example, is required to provide medical assistance to vessels at all times. So we were given like this whole sheet of paper saying, okay, here's who you call. And France is required to get someone on the radio with you or your phone or whatever, and provide you medical assistance remotely. So that was really interesting to learn.
So that's something. So, but for any of those telemedical assistance services, what you need to do is basically before you leave, you have some medical forms that you can fill and provide to whatever service you subscribe to, and also you give a list of basically what you have in your medical kit. So they have this on file, and whenever, if you have ever have to call them, they already have that information, and they can better point you to, like, okay, use this particular antibiotic in this case, or stuff like this. So we're talking about the service provided in France, free of charge. However, like the same company in the US, in the UK, MSOS provides also telemedical assistance, and it's 1,400 euros per year. So,
right.
Yeah, if you can take advantage of kind of, if your home country, or provide some of those services, obviously that sounds like a good plan. We're definitely going to investigate a little bit more, and but if not, that's at least one price point we got for telemedical assistance.
Yeah. And so there's three options. There's potentially free option that is required by law, depending on the countries. That's one thing to look to in terms of the countries you visit or the areas you visit. The second option is like a global service like MSOS. So you're saying basically 1,400 pounds, right? Because they would be pounds
euros.
per year.
They provided
euros
price. They provided the pricing in euros. Yes.
Okay, so per year, and they do global telemedicine. And then the third option is depending on what insurance you have. Your insurance may also offer global telemedicine emergency assistance, which is what we found when we started looking at insurance again, because I am absolutely not happy with our current insurance provider, Cigna Global. So I'm looking for alternatives. What I found out in talking to some other brokers, so what we've been doing is sort of going through US brokers, and then you end up getting sort of the same set of people who provide these global insurance programs for people who do global travel. And the prices are pretty high. So just in general, we pay right around $1,000 a month for global medical coverage with a pretty high deductible. And it covers us for when we're outside the US for things, and then inside the US for wellness visits, outpatient visits, and anything major injuries, as long as we're not in the US more than 90 days. So that has been fine in the last couple of years, because that's kind of how we've been using it, and that's all fine. But the thing is when you start talking to brokers outside the US, actually you get a lot more options. And if you're not, like, now that we're going to start our circumnavigation, we're not necessarily going to be in the US a lot. So if you sort of say, okay, we're going to be in France, dealing with our boat, I have a long stay visa, residing in France, because we're not establishing a residence there. We're just like visiting to be able to get and fix everything and then start operation west. You basically set up France as your main place, the main place you're going to be seen, and then it covers you for everything associated with all your wellness visits, all your, just I would call voluntary outpatient in any French country you visit, which French islands and the Caribbean, which suits us just fine for maybe the first couple of years, right? And then it covers you globally. So if something happens unforeseen, you have an accident, you rush to the emergency room or evacuated or airlift or whatever it is, it covers you for all that. What happens though, if you select France, for instance, it means that if you have something kind of more catastrophic, say you discover you have cancer or you have a heart attack and it requires follow-up visits, then the worst case scenario is you go back to France for those kinds of treatments. You don't actually go back to the US. So that's kind of a decision that's personal, of course. For me, it was like, well, that wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. So you have to kind of look at like, what's the likelihood that's going to happen? And we know we're healthy. We did full body scans in Turkey for cheap. So that works out fine. So I think we might go with that. And the reason is because it's our cost down to $500 a year for both of us versus $1,000 a year. Which
$1,000 a month.
What do you think? 1,000 a year?
You said 1,000 a year.
1,000 a month. Yeah. 1,000 a month.
Versus
Sorry. Yeah.
500 a month.
1,000 a year would be super cheap. Yeah.
Again, because like most cruisers, like the US is definitely a very unique country where the costs can go up very quickly. And so once you spend most of your time outside, then I think it justifies to take a different approach. And especially when you work in the US for a bigger company, they subsidize part of this medical insurance. When suddenly you're a small business or like a small company or not working, then you bear the burden of the whole cost.
Or an individual, just a private individual.
Yeah,
it's crazy. Is that our deductible's so high that what we learned is like if you go get your teeth cleaned in France, for instance, it's going to cost you 40 euros. 40 euros out of pocket, it's easy to just pay the 40. You have to pay the 40 euros. You have to manually submit the claims to our insurance company. It doesn't like automatically track our international coverage number. So it's all like a manual process, which is through Cigna is like so cumbersome and impossible that I feel like they just sort of create these hurdles so you won't actually file claims. So like the $40 just to pay and not even worry about filing it as a claim towards your deductible is like worth the ease of all the hassle of even filing a claim. So it's like these, you can get antibiotics in France. If you had a sinus infection or something for like, I don't know, 10 euros or something, it's so cheap, so I'm sure every single place we visit isn't going to be that, but certainly most of the places we visited so far in Europe and Turkey and, all these different places, it's been super easy.
And when they realize
and you hear the same thing about Mexico, you know what I mean? Like we've heard that too about cruising in Mexico is cheap. So we're looking into different options. So I'm going to do a whole separate podcast date once I kind of make a decision on what we're going to go with and can talk about more detail what we're getting. But most of these include evacuation coverage. So if you have to, be rescued by a helicopter or, something like that, they have these plans. A lot of people get them like if they're doing, they're climbing Everest or going hiking in places, they have this kind of traveler's evacuation services, I guess. If you want to get rescued, if you want to, there's an option in that to do like a emergency wartime evacuation, like a military evacuation, if you want that. But there's things like that. And also, this sounds really bad, but like, where do you want your mortal remains sent? There's a whole process for making sure your remains, get somewhere. Which is another thing, you don't necessarily want to be talking about, but certainly is something that is part of like thinking about your coverage overall. So a lot to kind of think about just in terms of planning, for the worst case scenario, but knowing that the reality is kind of back to the statistics we said in the very beginning, like of the worst thing happening, so say a head injury with head trauma, for the 44% of the incidents encountered over that period of time when the study was done, so that was a 4-year period, 1% had a head trauma or included an evacuation. So the likelihood of that happening is still pretty low. Not, it exists, but it's not a high risk. But you definitely want to be evacuated if that does happen to you, right? Okay, so that's what we wanted to share with everybody is the medical procedures and the medical training and the medical preparation. So it kind of brings
Yeah.
everything kind of full circle. Like after this medical training, do you feel like, okay, I could do this?
I think the combination of having done things once and also knowing that you have access to like people on shore to help you with like advice and assistance. And nowadays with the technology, potentially, like, I mean, you could do a video conference with Starlink in the middle of the ocean, and you could really show, like, instead of describing the cut or where it's broken, whatever, I mean, you could really show, and you could even perform, I guess, like some medical, things
Procedure
and have some procedures and have somebody like, guide you. So I think it's definitely easier or potentially easier nowadays than it used to be with all this technology and this preparation you can do. And so, yeah, I mean, I won't think about it too much once we've done the preparation.
Yeah. Cool. All right. Well, that's all we have to share today. This is a little bit long of a podcast, but it's a really good topic. So I hope you guys enjoyed it. If you have any questions, make sure you drop us a note at sailingowen@gmail.com. And fair winds for now.
Bon vent.
Thank you for listening. If you like this podcast, please subscribe, like, or share with another covert castaway. Fair winds for now.